Hi, Jyozen. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Good. Before we kind of get into the narrative of your practice, journey to practice, could you tell people a little bit about what your current priest and teaching activities are now to kind of put everything into context?
Certainly. Well, I share the activities with several of our unsui, the assistant priests that we have. But at Kanzeonji, we have Zoom practice these days, although a few people show up here during the practice every once in a while. But it's 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Great. And you're in the Matsuoka lineage, is that correct?
That's correct. So Matsuoka Roshi is my dharma grandfather.
And I've seen you post on Facebook pictures of you. Is it Zenji? What is the
Zenji is the one I go to most commonly. We also have the Long Beach Buddhist Church here that I've been to, and Zenji is here. There are three of the main Sotoshu temples.
Okay.
I do visit other temples now and then. I like to do that.
Great. Could you, so to kind of talk a little bit about the narrative of your practice journey, could we start and maybe tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of what that experience was like?
I'm a California kid, still in California now, born and raised, middle class family. Dad was a union worker, the Lockheed aircraft over here.
Yeah. And did you guys grow up with any sort of religious orientation?
My grandmothers both went to church every Sunday in two different denominations, but they went every Sunday. My grandfathers did not. They would take them and drop them off. And I assume my parents would go to Sunday school. And they did the same thing with us, except for, my mom went inside. We went to Sunday school in a separate room. My mom would go into church and my dad would probably leave.
So you never went into the services?
I did later, after Sunday school practice. I stopped going at about 10 years old, but then I would go with friends, regular Christian, one denomination or another. My dad was a Jehovah's Witness, and we did that for a while. Mostly Presbyterian. My mom was a Presbyterian. My grandmother on her side was a Presbyterian. So
how did those experiences resonate with you? The church?
They were fine. Very good social atmosphere. Although, as I was about to mention, at 10 years old, I was the only one going, I think. My mother would take me and drop me off. I don't think she stayed anymore. And I was like, do I have to go? And she's like, no, you don't have to go. It's not obligatory. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go. And that was, I think, the last time I went to our own Presbyterian church. But then, as I said, I went with friends to their, hey, you want to go to church with me? I'm like, sure, I'll go. And I did Jehovah's Witness with my dad every once in a while.
What was that a conflict? I know Jehovah's Witnesses are not always super excited about other Christian sects. Was that any sort of?
I didn't have any problems with other sects. I mean, they believe that they're correct. I guess most people do. Right? Whatever you decide you want to do, you chose it because you thought it was the correct way to go. So that's what you did. And they certainly hold to that strongly, the group that I was with. If you went anywhere else, they were aghast. Yes.
Through your childhood and teenage years, did you consider yourself a Christian? Were you a believer in God or Jesus?
Yes, absolutely.
And did you pray? Did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you? So at this stage of your life, did you have anything what you would consider religious or mystical experiences, or was it purely kind of an emotional, intellectual relationship?
Not in relation to the Christian religion, but I was already a meditator and I learned it mostly in martial arts.
Okay.
I started martial arts at 6 years old. And so we always meditated before and after class. And other than that, my only meditation experience was sitting under a tree and just gazing out into space, which I love to do.
Don't
do it in school. I used to do it during school, just looking out the window. Teachers didn't like that too well, but you could do it under a tree. It's great.
Yeah. What kind of martial arts did you do?
I started in Hawaiian Kempo, and then a little karate, a touch of this, a touch of that. Most lately in weapons, particularly the Japanese archery, sometimes called Zen archery, Kyudo. Yeah, it's probably what I'm known most for.
Did you have any, through your high school years, teenage years, did you have any encounter with Eastern spirituality at all?
I did. Actually, it really started in high school because I was in a special program where we were able to design our own classes and things like that. And so many of the guys were interested in yoga and Tibetan Buddhism. And so we would bring in teachers. And so we started doing a lot of meditation.
Interesting. And what kind of school was this? I'm sorry.
It was called SWASH, School Within a School. So we were in a high school, regular high school, but we had our own floor in a building. And we didn't have traditional classes. We would just kind of meet with our teachers, like a Dokusan. You'd meet with your teacher and you would tell them what you were doing and they would approve it or not approve it. And then I think once a week we sat down and we talked you talk to each other about what you're doing, right? And bounce things off and presented your programs or your whatever it is you were building or doing or making. I did martial arts demonstrations. I did lots of them. I did a Iaido for them. This is how I draw. And it's practical in everyday use because you can cut a cake with a knife like this and it's much better, or a tomato or whatever, right? And so if you use the blade properly, you'll get a better cut.
If you, were there any particular Eastern traditions, from a religious point of view that initially kind of spoke to you, that kind of grabbed your attention?
Initially, probably the Hindu, related around the yoga. I had the Zen idea from the martial arts practice, mostly Japanese martial arts. One of my earliest ones were Chinese, but still in Chan would be influenced in there, right? So yeah, and Shorinji Kempo came later, but this whole idea of Shorinji Shaolin, right? So all of that was really interesting. The TV series Kung Fu came out when I was just starting high school, and I watched that like religiously. That was fantastic, right?
Yeah, come to think of it, that was probably my first, even though I didn't realize it was Buddhism, that was probably my first encounter with Buddhism.
Yeah, so you don't really, it's very romanticized idea, right? But yeah, I loved it. I was like, this is fantastic. That's what I want to do. So even when I joined the Marine Corps, I was like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a translator with Chinese language, right?
So,
it's not what I ended up doing, of course. They move you around, but that's what I said I wanted to do when I joined the Marine Corps. Was okay, this is what I want to do. They agreed, but it didn't happen. But it was
so what motivated your interest in Eastern spirituality? Was it like
all martial arts related?
But like what was it? You just wanted to.
To me, I didn't understand all the differences. That was like one package to me, just like the movie Kung Fu. It was all interrelated, right? I had no idea that all those relationships weren't really all that strong at all. So I thought it was like one thing. All Buddhists did martial arts and all martial arts did meditation. That's what I thought. So it was more you. And I didn't understand between Japan and China, and, they're different countries, but to me, it was like all one big culture. I had no idea all the different major differences in some places. So
would it be fair to say that you were mostly attracted to the aesthetic and mythos and so forth, as opposed to maybe looking for liberation?
Yes, I didn't understand that concept really at all, other than some mystical, magical thing out there that some priests acquired this great insight of, I don't know what they were. So I aspired to or anything like that. It was just like, wow, that's so amazing, right? I just wanted to do what my teachers were doing. That's all. See, even today, that's really all I want to do. What are my teachers doing? I'll do that. I sometimes change it, I Americanize it, but I didn't originally. I did whatever they said, exactly the way they said it, the best I could. I got in trouble.
It sounds like overall you had a pretty stable, happy childhood and teenage years.
Yeah, I had all kinds of complaints during the time, but looking back, they're really, I'm middle class white kid in California. I have nothing to complain about. It was like pretty easy sailing.
So no major like existential angst or.
Oh, sure, things you make up in your own mind.
Yeah.
Teenage stuff, right? It's like.
So did you go to college first, or did you go straight to the Marines? What was your path there?
So I went straight to the Marines. Before I finished high school, I joined up. And then as soon as I graduated from high school, off I went to boot camp. And I decided to sign up as a reservist rather than full-time, and the Vietnam War was just ending. So they trained us really hard, but I didn't have to go to any wars at that time. We did do, what do we call them? Missions and operations. They would, if you had a particular skill set and they needed you somewhere, we could hop on a plane and send off. They would send us.
What year did you
Other
join
than
the
that,
Marines?
it was just training. I drove all kind of vehicles, and
What year
my
was
original
this?
job was analyzing photographs from the satellites and stuff like that. That was my desk job. I didn't really like it.
What was this, a 4-year process that you were in?
I was in for 6 years, but as a reservist, I need to plug in the computer. That's why I'm moving around. I had unplugged it. There. Now we should be good. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. So you were in for 6 years as a reserve. So did you work during the week and then?
Yeah, week my family has a business. I worked for my family during the week. And then on weekends, once a month or sometimes more, because it's my family's business, I had flexible hours. So if there was a parade to do or something like that, then I was always the volunteer for those. So actually, I could have left early. I had so many hours in that I could have, months early. I was like, all your time's filled. You can go. And I stayed a little longer.
So during the 6 years where you were working and being a reservist in the Marines, did you have any sort of spiritual or meditation practice at this point?
I still had all the stuff from the martial arts. I was still a martial artist, but I hadn't started any like official Zen practice or anything like that. Although who I consider my root teacher, Kaizan Wajo, he's a Shingon-shu priest.
Oh, interesting.
He was really my Kyudo teacher, the Japanese Zen archery. And so I met him just as I was finishing my Marine Corps time. And before him, I had a teacher in EI and Kendo kata named Okubo, Hirotaka Okubo. And I would say he was really my first Buddhist teacher. Even though, again, he wasn't a Buddhist priest at all, but we would go to the temples for all the events, and he would talk about the Dharma. And I think before him, even in my martial arts practice, it was playtime, it was sports, right? We meditated and stuff, but it was just part of the martial arts practice. Okubo Sensei changed that, and then Kosaka Sensei, being a Shingon-shu Buddhist priest, it infiltrated. I even have a Dharma name from him, but I'm not a Shingon priest in any way. I never really trained in Shingon-shu, but he just gave me this name. I'm a sort of student. So
did you go to the temple with him?
We went for regular service, big services, New Year's Day and things like that.
Shingon, I should know more about it, but it's tantric Buddhism. Is that correct?
Tantric Buddhism, yes. True sound. Shingon means true sound.
So there was a lot of chanting and.
Yes, we like to deep, low chanting. Kanji, even lower. I can't even do it anymore. We were low and slow most of the time. Although we did some ceremonies really fast. Still pretty low, but really fast. Yeah, we did lots of those. That was interesting.
Is that the sect they do the fire ceremony?
Yes, the Goma.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did it almost every ceremony.
Here, our trash truck's coming by. I need to close my here. Sorry. So looking, from your perspective now, looking back to your martial arts years, do you think you had moments of samadhi and no mind and so forth that?
All the time, that sort of thing, where you're in the zone. Right? It's not exactly the same as we know today, but back then it was like that, pretty amazing. Plenty of times, because your body is just moving within those experiences that you've already had when you're training, right? So you get in a match or even in a real life situation, and suddenly your body is just moving, and you're right where you need to be when you need to be there. So
did you start?
That's about as close as I would say we would get. Yes.
Yeah. Did you start a family? Were you married or have kids or?
Well, I find a little later in life, but in my 30s, I did get married. I got a wife just on the other side of this wall, daughter living in Tokyo.
Hmm.
Yes.
Your daughter's living in Tokyo now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Um, so what was the transition from martial arts and kind of general interest in Buddhism to actual Zen practice? Like what
It
was the
was
gateway
really
there?
martial arts for most of it.
Hmm.
At one point, I decided in order to enhance my martial arts practice, I needed more meditation.
Hmm.
And Kosaka Sensei being a Buddhist priest, I figured he must meditate every day. We were
Hmm.
roommates for a while, but I wasn't there all the time. So
Yeah.
I went to him and I said, I'm going to come to your house every day. When do you meditate? I'll meditate with you. He says,
Hmm.
I don't meditate every day.
Are you
He said,
crazy?
and he lives on the other side of town at this point. And he's like, you should just find a Zen temple by your house and go sit. That's what they do. And so I called Kanzeonji, where my teacher was, and I said,
Hmm.
I need to sit every day. Do you sit every day? He says, yes, we sit every day. I'm like, okay, I'm coming.
Hmm.
And I got there, and it turns out my daughter was into kind of yoga stuff. As a baby, she was doing yoga poses and things.
Interesting.
And I said, she needs some formal practice. We need to find a yoga place. And we're at Jamba Juice over here. And there's a thing up, kids yoga. I'm like, kids yoga, it's perfect. I called them, we went over. It turns out it was Kanzeonji. I didn't make
Oh,
the connection. Uh,
interesting.
and there was a woman there teaching kids yoga. And so I met my teacher at that point, and we did the yoga and everything with them. And then later I'm like, I'm calling him, this is Kanze. Oh, I'm sorry, I got it backwards. I mixed it up. I had called him first when I found
Okay.
Kanzeonji. And he said, don't come, we're moving to
I see.
Oman, way out in the nice area up there. And so I didn't go. And then it was later that my daughter was born and was doing the yoga 2 or 3 years later. And we went, and I'm like, aren't you the same guy I talked to?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh
Interesting.
yeah, we didn't move. Everybody wanted us to stay. So we stayed. And then I started. So that would have been about 98.
Mhm. And what was the teacher's name?
I'm sorry.
What was the teacher's name?
Ryugen.
Mhm.
Zenko Ryugen Watanabe.
Mhm.
Yeah. So he was a
And
student of Matsuoka Roshi.
mhm. And was he a full-time Zen teacher, or did he have a
Full time.
career? Yeah.
Nope. As soon as he came and established Kanzeonji, he became full-time Zen teacher for 38
Mhm.
years.
And he was he a direct Matsuoka heir, or was there another priest in between?
Directly under Matsuoka Roshi,
Mhm.
which was kind of nice for them because they both spoke Japanese. They're both Japanese, right? So they could
Mhm.
talk to each other really well. It was nice for them.
Mhm.
And he went
And
to Japan with
so
him a couple of times, at least a couple.
what's that?
He went to Japan with him a couple of
All
times.
right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
at least a couple. I don't know the details.
Did he ever live at Matsuoka's temple? Do you know?
I don't know that people really live there
Oh,
in
okay.
I never heard of anybody living there. Matsuoka Roshi lived there, but I don't think others lived there, as far
Okay.
as I know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think so. In 84, he started Kanzeonji, and in 85, Matsuoka Roshi came and did the dedication ceremony.
Mhm.
Uh, so he had, I guess, what we would call Shukkei Tokudo today
Mhm.
in 84, I think, same time as Maguire Roshi. I think it was same ceremony.
Mhm.
Ken McGuire, Fred McGuire, and my teacher, I believe, took the Shukkei Tokudo same time.
Mhm.
And then he would have had transmission, I suppose, when they did the dedication ceremony around that time. I know for McGuire Roshi, it was similar. A few years later, he started his temple. My teacher
Mhm.
went there. He and the McGuires were very close.
Mhm.
They came to our dedication ceremony. He went to theirs.
Mhm. Did you ever meet McGuire before he passed away?
No, I actually haven't met hardly any of my Dharma cousins other than on Facebook. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
So what was your what was your first opinion or perception of your teacher when you finally met him in person?
Oh, the same thing. He's this Japanese yogi, really. So he has this whole mystical air about him. Actually, I was pretty scared of him
Hmm.
because I was scared of Kosaka Sensei when I started to. But and they didn't really talk. There was a head priest, assistant priest, Zenju.
Hmm.
And so he was the one who instructed us and told us what to do and what not to do and how to do it and everything. I didn't
Hmm.
really interact with my teacher for the first couple of years, really. I was going every day.
Interesting.
but I didn't really interact with him much. We did the ceremonies and then off he would go.
So no Dokusan.
Not really. We had a Teiso that was not a Dharma talk, but more like a question and answer session. And so Zenru would gather questions from all of us on a little card. And then he and Ryugen Osho would go in the other room and they would discuss it and they would come back and Zenru would ask the questions and we would have a Dharma talk about our questions. And then we could ask more questions if we wanted. And then when Zenru left, we went back to Japan, then it became my job to do that.
I see. And did you, was there session at the time?
So we mostly did just like day-long sessions, like once a month on a Sunday, we do most of the day. We didn't do very many like week-long sessions until I came on board as a priest. And then more, I like to do week-longs. We did Mongolia. We have a sister Sangha in Mongolia. So I think we went 3 years and we would do week or longer session there. So we didn't really do a lot, mostly just daily sitting. I asked once if we could do more session. But his routine, mind you, for basically 6 days a week was to get up and do his own ceremonies at the little altars and stuff in the other rooms, and then come in and sit with us for an hour and chant for an hour, hour and a half, and then change and do yoga for an hour or two, and then prepare the meal and eat the meal and then clean the whole place and then repeat it at night. So he did that 5 days a week. And the only difference is on Saturday, he didn't have the night service and Sunday was his day to do laundry and grocery shopping. So he did that for 35 or more years. Right? I think total was 38 years before I became Jushoku. So when I asked, can we do like a week-long session or something? He said, sure, you could sleep there. You're not changing anything.
Right.
It's like, this is what I do every day.
Right. Did were the ceremonies all in Japanese? Did you guys use English translations?
So we did English only for what we would call like public Hanamatsuri. We would chant like Hanyu. We would chant it in Japanese, the Sino-Japanese, and then we would chant it in English for the visitors, I guess. And we would do the same thing for the Shigu Seigan. 4 vows, we would do that. We would do it in the Sino-Japanese and then English and then the Sino-Japanese. Oh, and the robe chant. The robe chant, we would also do that same way. Sino-Japanese and then English and Sino-Japanese. Everything else was pretty much in Japanese. I took all the English out. I never really. So we don't do it. I give me a couple of complaints. I'm gonna have to put some of it back in. I do it for the robe chant still. And I sometimes do it for the Shigu Seigan. I almost never do the Hanyu Shingyo in English because my root teacher was Shingonshu, and we were that vibration. The vibration is very important to them. So we didn't even try to do it in Sanskrit. Kosaka Sensei's job was to translate Sanskrit into Japanese, and so he could do some of the Sanskrit. And his chanting was fabulous, but it was always in the Sino-Japanese. Different tones, different speeds. We had 6 basic tones and 6 basic speeds.
Did you so how many people would come around on a typical group set?
At Kanzeonji originally with my teacher. So when I first joined, we had 120 some odd members, and we could fill we had 5 buildings, 5 houses. They were just houses, not temples. We had 5 houses and people lived in some of them, and we had one for the yoga and one for the Zen. And the Zen was a small house, but it had 2 decent sized rooms, and we would fill those rooms. By the time I was more active, I don't know how I chased them all away, but we were down to just a few of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the 80s there's definitely a kind of I think in the late 80s and early 90s there's kind of a Zen boom to some degree. That was probably the heyday as far as
it certainly was for us.
Yeah,
we started in 85. I didn't join until 98, right? So I'm one of the latecomers. There's still people in the Sangha that have been around longer than me. I'm the Jushoku, but
and so can you talk a little bit about kind of your clerical career progression? How quickly did you do Jukai before you did
So I joined in 98, and then in 2000, and I was just coming to meditate every day. By that time I was still coming every day.
Mhm.
And one of my kohai, one of the juniors, wanted to take what we called new mon. We have different words and different meanings behind them for ours. I asked the people here at Zensuji, we call it this and we do this. And the chief priest there said, oh, you do it the old way. That's so quaint, you know. Even the way I chanted and played the bells and stuff, I said, I don't think I think I made some mistakes, right? Which we always do. And he's like, you do it the old way. And I said, well, I'll learn the new way, don't worry. And he's like, I kind of like the old way. But yeah, I had to learn the new way because the bells signify things, which I didn't know. It signifies things, what people are supposed to do. I think they just ignored me. I was playing away. And they said, he didn't know. Yeah. So, but originally, I finally figured out, they gave me their book, right? I made a donation, but I have a book and it has everything in there when you're supposed to play the bells and how you chant. It has the English and the Japanese. And so it's fantastic.
That's from Sotoshu.
Highly recommend.
That's from Sotoshu.
That's from Sotoshu, right?
Yeah.
It's called Soto School Scriptures for Daily Services and Practice. Not everything is in there. I'm over there and we're going to do this. And I'm like, what page is that on? Like, oh, it's not in there. Like, okay, I'll follow along as best I can.
So sorry, I kind of made you go off on a tangent there. But so what was the steps of your kind of clerical progression?
Oh yeah. So 98, I started with him. Of course, I had my root teacher, Kaizan Wajo, right? And then the kohai was going to take what we call Nyumon Tokudo. It's basic. It's just a basic Buddhist initiation, right? Okay. Take the 5 vows. We did 5 vows at the time. Take 5 vows. You get to wear a samue if you want. Well, I actually kind of insisted. You're supposed to wear samue, black samue, and we gave them a brown wagesa, not a rakus, but just a wagesa. And originally they had sotoshu emblems on it, but later we did it with just dharma wheels, which was interesting.
And you get a Buddhist name at that point?
And you get your Buddhist name. So I did that in 2000. I got the name Jyozen. You don't get a dogo. You only get, I forgot the other one's called Kaigo, I think. You only get the one name.
And that and you're taking refuge in the 3 treasures.
Right, 3 treasures, and you vow not to do anything bad anymore and only do good things. But instead of, it's basically the same. Usually we do the Bodhisattva vows 16, I think, in Sotoshu is the current standard, 10 vows, and there's 6 others for the 3 and 3, right? But you just take out the second 5 out of the 10, and that's what we did for Nyumon Tokudo. And then we had Zaike Totte after that, which was
leaving home at stay.
So closer to the Jukai, I think. But we gave it a lot more importance. To us, you were becoming a priest in the temple. If you took Zaike Totte, because the only people who would take Shuke Tokudo were the people who lived in the temple. If you did not live in the temple, you could not take Shuke Tokudo.
Because you're literally leaving home in that situation.
You actually had to leave home and shave your head.
Yeah.
You couldn't leave it. If you took Zaike, you could keep your hair. Most people shaved it for the ceremony, but you could keep your hair after that. And you only wore you wore black rakusu, but the people who took Shuke Tokudo could wear a dark brown.
And do you know if the progression of the, initially getting the Buddhist name and taking the refuges, and then the actual ordination and initiation, did that come from Matsuoka, or was that something originated?
And directly from my teacher. He felt he had not the ability. We had this discussion for a while. So is it a Sotoshu ordination, because we're not really officially part of Sotoshu, right? So we just kind of left it open. I mean, my Kechimaku is a Sotoshu Kechimaku, right? But we also had the discussion when I took, when I finally got what we call Dendoshi transmission for him, which we also give more importance than the regular Denpo, because it's the highest thing we can give, really, right? So we elevate it in our own eyes. Now, he said, now you could add your name to it. But then he was like, but it's Sotoshu. Maybe just start with Matsuoka Roshi, right? And then him and then me. We're 3 of us, right? New chart. But then I talked to some of our cousins, and they're all using the whole chart.
I mean, if you think about it, there's Dogen's lineage, right?
It's still
there's Sotoshu, which is
branch.
There's Sotoshu, which is
it's a little branch.
Yeah, the Sodoshu, which is literally a organization.
Right.
It's not the only Dogen lineage. It
Right.
was for a while, but yeah.
So we decided we would go ahead and we just use the whole Tetsumiyaku chart from one of my pieces of paper, right?
Yeah, because even in the Suzuki Roshi lineage, a pretty significant number of the priests are not actually officially Sotoshu priests. I mean, it's
not registered. I found this. I was invited to a Sotoshu conference, Sotoshu USA conference, and I thought I'm going as the only one that's the non-registered little thing, right? And so we had a little poster board up with things about our temple. And people were asking me about it. I said, well, we're not official Sotoshu. He said, what do you mean by that? I said, we're not registered. I'm not registered, and they said, oh, neither are we. Like, what do you mean? You're listed on the website. And later I was actually asked if we wanted to be listed. And so that was kind of interesting. It's like, I thought I'm the only one. But it turns out there's lots of them all across America that they're not really registered. I thought it was just Roshi's people.
So you took the refuge, got a Buddhist name, and then do you feel that changed your practice at all, or was it just kind of continuing on?
I just did it because he told me to. He says, your Kohai's doing it, and you're here all the time, so you should do it. And I said, okay, whatever. And Zaike Tote was almost the same thing. I took that 6 years later in 2006. It's a different Kohai, I think. It's like, oh, your Kohai is going to take this Zaike Tote. I didn't even ask what it is or what it means. He says, they're going to take it, you should take it. I'm like, whatever you say, I'll do it.
Okay. Did you, at any point, did your direct formal contact with him in a practice context change? Did you start going to Dokusan? Did you? Yeah,
so even after the regular Nimon Tokudo, I was a lot more active. And so there were times it was not really official Dokusan. I shouldn't say that. We just met. Can I talk to you? So it's very, very informal. Just sometimes about my practice, sometimes about anything. So I didn't even know the word Dokusan. It was just like, can I talk to you? And of course. And we would sit down and we would talk. And then by the time I took Zaike Tote, we were doing that regularly because I was there after everybody else went home. I had a very flexible schedule, right? So everybody else went home and we would sit, and when we would go into the other rooms, and he has his own little circuit of chants and things he does. He has some Shingon influence and some Tendai influence and some Nichiren influence. And so, and of course, he's a Zen yogi. He's a swami. So we had this whole little routine we did, going to the little altars. And I had to go in there before everything and change the water and stuff. And afterwards, we went in there, we would do these chants, little rituals. And then after that, we would sit down and have another cup of tea together, often, if I was still there. And then I could ask anything and talk about anything. So I don't remember any formal. He was my teacher and we spent a lot of time together.
Could you elaborate on what you mean by that he's a Zen yogi?
There, in one of the teachers that he had, Jima Sensei, was really big on this idea of Buddhist yoga. With the feeling that Shakyamuni Butsu wasn't a Buddhist, he was a yogi. And that what we're doing is a very simplified version well, actually, not even simplified, a very early yoga. The original yoga was basically meditation, taking a posture, could be Hankafusa or Kekafusa or some other posture. We actually have 20 basic postures, right? And you take that posture and you meditate there. That's it. That was the original yoga in our minds. And later we get this Hatha yoga, which we also incorporated. We did a lot of Hatha yoga. And of course, he's a tantric priest. So, because of Swami. So all of these elements were mixed in his mind. There was no difference between them. There was no separation between them. So we even had Shinto elements, right? So he's not a Shinto priest in any way. He would often be, I don't know anything, but this is what I was taught. So I do this little bit that I was taught. And I did the same thing. I went to a Shinto priest and I had a few interactions and he said, okay, now you can do this whenever there's an opening ceremony or there's a this or that. And, cool. Not a Shinto priest in any way. I know nothing but these 2 or 3 little ceremonies that he taught me. So I do those because that's a Shinto thing. We call it Zen archery, but it's actually more Shinto than Zen. But
was he he's Japanese American, correct?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think he has a green card. Yeah.
Yeah. Was he born in Japan and came here?
Came
Yeah.
here in the early 80s, met Matsuoka Roshi here. But he
Do you
said
know
he
what?
met Roshi even earlier, so I don't know where that comes in. But
I'm sorry, say that again. I
he had
missed.
Roshi even earlier, so he had some teacher previous to Matsuoka Roshi. He's had several teachers, and after also. This Iijima sensei I mentioned is later.
Do you know what brought him to the States?
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why he decided to come here. I think it's his personality. We're kind of, by being under Matsuoka, we're kind of these black sheep kind of thing, right? I think that he prefers that. And in Japan, that might be a little harder. I shouldn't say that on public forum, probably. But I think it's my own image. Could be totally wrong. I've only known him for 20 something years.
Did what like what in what way did he teach you? Did he mostly teach you through his presence, watching him? I mean, would he instruct you a lot? I mean, what
Very little instruction from any of my teachers.
Mhm.
They tell you when you're wrong. You can't do that. Okay.
Mhm.
But the principles come out in how you move and what you do, and learning to live inside robes and inside a temple, and how you move around and how you do things, and you know, the straightness of things and the ways things can be different and where they can't be different. That was always interesting. You can do this, but you can't do that. And I always have to, why this but not that? What's the difference between the two? And difference between teachers. Having different teachers actually is kind of nice, because you need one that you're going to bounce everything off of. This must be the way I want to do it because I chose this teacher, right? But then that's a little different. That's a little different in being able to see, particularly the similarities. So you have 4 teachers, let's say, and these 4 teachers all do this. Well, that must be important. But this thing, they all do differently. Well, that's their way of interpretation, right? But you get to see that's particularly the similarities. Like, it's always done like this, or some principle in there. Yeah, it's different, but this part, that's the same. So I want to get that.
So it's not like he set you down like, okay, here's Buddhism 101.
Never had.
Here's the 4 noble truths. Here's the Eightfold Path. It was more, here are the forms, and let's manifest practice through these forms.
That's right. And my root teacher, Kosaka Sensei, actually told me, don't read anything. I could ask, but don't read anything. It didn't stop me. I mean, I still read some things, but and we translated the sutras. I said we didn't chant them. We didn't chant them in English, but we read them in English, and we could talk about what we read. That was actually, I wouldn't say it was encouraged, but it perfectly fine to understand what it is you're chanting and talk about that. We didn't have Dharma talks. We had those question and answer sessions, and that was your chance. You know, you could ask what Buddhism 101 is if you want, you know, and it would come out in there. But Dokusan usually had to do more with what you were doing wrong. Not don't do it anymore.
Which is a very Japanese way, you know.
There's all kinds of rules.
Yeah, I mean, when I've spent times at more traditional temples, you're not given any instruction. You're only told when you do something wrong, and then you have to infer what the right way. Yeah,
it's nice to know it's not just me. But yeah, that's the way that I was taught. You just you keep doing, and it works. I don't know how it works, but it works. Yeah. So, like, especially when I first started teaching Zen, right? It's like, I don't know anything. I did have some kind of experience back in when was that real deep experience? 2008. Yes. So in 2008, I had this kind of kensho, I guess we'd call it, or something, right? And so my teacher recognized it, and my root teacher recognized it. The students seemed to recognize something. I was like, that was interesting. You know, but then my root teacher, the one who told me, don't read anything, brought me a box of books.
After the kensho.
And then he said, you should read some of these because it'll give you the words to talk about your experience. Because he was right, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
There were no words to describe that experience, right? So that was kind of interesting.
When did that happen? Did that happen during a?
But that's a whole nother story, right?
I talked over you. Say that again, please.
Oh, I just said that those kinds of experiences are almost irrelevant.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
The real thing is what everyone could do is live right here, right now, with reality as it is right in front of us. That's it. Everything else is how to manifest that. And this kind of lifestyle is the easiest way. Right? But you just do it every moment of every day, wherever you're doing it, right? We all know that. So yes, you can have these little experiences that are fantastic, and you live with it more maybe after those sometimes, right? It polishes. It polishes. But the most important thing everybody does, or tries to.
Would it be fair to say that your Kensho experience kind of showed you the importance of living in the moment and being, as opposed to
it's kind of funny because then you say, well, why don't we just live like this every moment of every day all the time? Why would it slip away, right? But it takes you a while to recognize that it's a continuous practice. It's a way of living, it's not a moment. So I even hesitate using that Kensho idea, right? And that's why I say it's kind of irrelevant, because it's like, it's not about that. It's about every moment. Right? So, and anybody who's had any of those experiences eventually recognizes that. So it's a little bit of, the words are tough. None of them are quite right, right? It's just the way it is.
So your opening, was that during a retreat, or was that just going about your normal day, or?
Actually, it was doing Judo.
Judo.
That had been my practice for so long, and I was just doing isolated, really deep kind of meditation while I was shooting, and it was like, wow, who shot that? Right. And then it was interesting.
And so initially you took ordination as a home, staying at home and taking ordination.
Right.
Yeah. Did you later?
My teacher told me that's as high as I could go. Unless I lived in the temple. That was it. Nothing he could do for me.
And
I just took it because he told me to anyhow. So I was like, oh, okay.
Is that why you wear the green rakusu instead of brown?
No, I can wear whatever I want.
Okay.
I have a yellow one. I have fancy ones. This is just I'm wearing a samurai and casual. I don't want to get too fancy of a rakusu.
Right.
Casual of clothes. No, I like this. This is made by a friend, a Dharma brother in Cuba.
Oh, okay.
And he made this for me. Thank you very much. Maybe a couple of them. And they're very, very nice.
When you say Dharma brother, a student of your teacher's?
No, he's a totally different lineage and everything, but I feel very close to him.
Makes sense. So eventually you got transmission from your teacher.
So he had to find a workaround. I said, it's not happening. I have a wife and a daughter and a job. Psyche's fine. He says, well, maybe one day we could find a way to give you transmission. This was years later. Right? And I'm like, that would be kind of cool. I'll take it. I love pieces of paper. I'll take it. And he's like, well, no, I can't, And then I have a little zendo in the back here. Before I had this space, I had a little zendo in the back. It's still there. I still go for my personal practice. And I was sitting there. It was basically for my personal practice. I didn't go there to Kanzeonji every day anymore. And I bought this house, and so I could sit there, and it was great. And I said, some of the Kyudo students, particularly, and a few other people want to come. And I don't have Zaike today. But remember, again, we consider that a person with Zaike a priest of the temple. We really equate it with Shuke Tokuno. They're the same, just one lives in the temple and one lives at home. We didn't have this big separation between them. And he said, you're a priest. Well, go ahead, do it. No problem. I'm like, I'm not really comfortable. So I had traveled with him to different people's homes, and we would dedicate their little altars on their homes, or bless the house, or bless their pets or their cars. We had all kinds of these ceremonies we would do, right? I said, I'll tell you what, you want me to do it, that's fine, I'll do it. But you have to come and bless my little zendo. We'll do a little blessing ceremony in my zendo, and I'll take that as a really definite, I have your permission to take and show people how to do Zen. Not ordain or anything like that, just basic teachings, answer questions. He says, oh, if you know the answer, you should answer. If you don't know the answer, ask me, right? I said, okay, if you'll come and do that blessing ceremony like we've done many times, I'll do it. He said, okay. And we picked the day, and I go pick him up. He has a car, but I go pick him up. He likes it. And I bring him over. And we do this most elaborate, fantastic. A lot of my students come, a dozen or so. And blessing ceremony with fire and water and air and incense and candles and flint stones. And it was just beautiful. We had a little snack after, and I'm taking him home. And I said, I really want to thank you. I've done a lot of these ceremonies with you, and that is the most elaborate, most beautiful blessing ceremony we've ever done. Thank you so much. And he's like, oh, that's not a blessing ceremony. That's a temple dedication ceremony. What did you call your little zendo? I said, that's Jizo An. He's like, yes, yes, yes. So that's Jizo An, and you're the Anju. So you see my name, Jyozen Anjyu, right? You're the Anju of Jizo An. He said, later I learned this is more for like retired abbots who have a little temple off the side of the main temple or something, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And he didn't explain it. He would just tell stories about different Anjus to me. So here's a nice story about an Anju. Here's a little nice story about an Anju. And I used to call him Osho-san. It's kind of like a casual way of talking about your teacher without his name and everything. But it helps also emphasize, some people think you're elevating by only talking about his title. But actually, especially by using san after, you are taking the person out of it and more respecting the role. So my Anju-san is more respecting my role as an Anju, as opposed to, which is just somebody who lives in an An. Doesn't mean anything. And as opposed to trying to elevate me. And I only use it in my name because he called me Anju-san. So when we would travel around Mongolia and the other places and do things, he would call me Anju-san. So they would all call me Anju-san. So if I just use Jyozen, they're looking for Anju. So to them, the Anju isn't a title. It's more like part of my name. Right. And so I had debated for a long time, especially on Facebook. It's like, what do I use? Jyozen? Do I do Jyozen? I didn't have a dogo. Sometimes today, when you take even Shukeitokuro, they give you a dogo and your regular dharma name, right? And you just don't use the one. But I didn't have it. I only had.
I didn't get one either. Yeah.
Right. Even Zaike Tote is still just one. And even when I got transmission, he didn't initially give me my dogo. I didn't have it now. And I became Jushoku, and I still didn't have it. Oh, and then I started going to Zensuji more, and they kept asking me what it was, and they thought I was being humble or something, I guess. So what's your... Like, well, I don't have it. It's just Jyozen, right? And so I finally told him, I said, they keep asking. And he says, well, that's a very special thing. We don't do that. Okay. Give me a little bit of time. He says, I guess you should have it. You should have it. So he did that. Same with the transmission, right? Originally, he said, I can't have it. I have to have Shukeitokudo. I have to live in the monastery or with him. Not really a monastery. I have to live with him. Right? Live in the temple. And then you could get transmission. And so he kept just saying, we can't, I know I talked to you about it before, but we can't do it unless you could live, and he didn't. So I guess we can't do that. And I think eventually what he decided, we never talked about this, but I think what he decided is, I'm Anju here. This was he dedicated this temple. This is a temple. At that time, I considered the whole back of the house the temple, this part and that part, and then I live over there, right? And it's like two separate things. But to me, like the whole thing's a temple now. But just my house, this nice spaces. And I think what he finally bent his rule with, I am living in the temple. I've been living here. I'm living in Jizo An.
Yeah.
Right? So to him, I think he was able to, in his mind, say, okay, maybe that's okay. And so then he started saying, maybe one day I'll give you transmission. He said, and I think this must be a story because I've heard this from other teachers. He says, on my deathbed, I'm going to open one eye. And if you're there, I might give you transmission. And I talked to another teacher in another lineage and stuff. And his father had told him the same thing. Right? And somebody else said, oh yeah, mine was something like that. So I think there must be some old story. I've never found the story.
Okay.
There must be some story where the guy says this. I'm laying on my deathbed and I'm an open one eye. And if you're there, I might give you transmission. I'm assuming, because otherwise my teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's I got 3 instances of people saying this, right? So I think it must be true. But the final one was 2016. He was like, I think I'm going to retire. 2017. The 16, 17. I get dates mixed up, but around that time, he says, I'm going to retire. What do you want to do? I said, same as always. I'll do whatever you tell me. And he says, well, what do you want? You know, I said, well, if I'm taking over, which it sounds like, I'll probably need the altar. Right? He's like, okay. And then a few months later, he was like, did you still want transmission? And I was like, I don't care what you do. You tell me what to do, I do it. And he's like, well, I already drew up the paperwork. We were the only ones there that day for Zazen. So we'll do it. And we went in the other room. We had this kind of little brief ceremony thing, and he gave me some paperwork and stuff. And then he's like, if you want a big ceremony, you want to invite a bunch of people, let me know. And I'm like, I don't care. You know, you tell me what to do, I do it. I'm not really ever in charge. I only do what I'm told. And that's not totally true either, because I'm doing stuff now that he doesn't really care for. But yeah, I told him it's American Zen, it's a new age, a new time. COVID did that, right? So I had one of my top Unsui, he really wanted to do Zoom practice. So we are talking to you on Zoom. My teacher would never do this. And I told him, I said, Hojo-san wants to do Zoom practice because we can't meet in person right now. He says, no Zoom. We don't do Zoom. Right? I'm like, well, how else are we gonna meet? You know, he says, everybody practice on their own, report to you, right? And, yeah. And Hojo-san was like, really, so I finally said, okay, we'll do it. You're in charge. And I went to my teacher and I said, we're doing Zoom. And he's like, no Zoom. No Zoom. And then, I don't know, it's quite a bit later. We're already still doing it. I went and visited him at his farm. He had a farm at the time. We're doing Zoom. You know, we're doing Zoom. Right? He's like, I'm glad it's you instead of me. Because I think he finally recognized it. It's just, I said, it's a new time. It's a new era. We don't have any choice. This, I know you don't like it, but that's what we're doing. And there were other things like that I changed. I wear samoe to our, I sometimes wear samoe and rakusu to our, I often wear samoe and rakusu to our daily 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Totally forbid by him. Has to be with full robes. We did wear rakusu. We were a little different there. Most people that I found in Sotoshu, particularly, I think most Zen places, they wear kesa for the ceremonies all the time. But we didn't. We only wore kesa outside. So it's almost backwards. We wore the kesa to protect us. And so when we would go outside, we were somewhere, we would put on the kesa. But in the ceremonies, we would wear our robes and wear rakusu. And I asked my teacher, I got the same answer I usually give him. I said, how come we do it this way? But at Sotoshu, when I go, they do it that way. He's like, oh, that's the way Matsuoka Roshi did it. So, okay. And that was the answer almost all the time. Every once in a while, there'd be something. He said, oh, I did that.
Could you talk a little bit about the Sister Sangha in Mongolia, like who they are, how that came about?
That was amazing. So it was originally actually off of Facebook. I don't do a lot of talking in the other pages. I have pages and groups that I started, but I don't really do much in them. I'm mostly just on my own timeline, posting whatever I'm doing today. And my memories, lots of memories since COVID, mostly memories. But if somebody said something that needed to be said, then great, I don't have to say anything. But every once in a while, there would be a conversation going on. I would say, this really needs to be said, and nobody's saying it. So I guess I better say it. I would put it in, and then, so I was contacted by a fellow in Mongolia. I didn't know he was in Mongolia. Message on Facebook. And he said, do you ordain? And I said, I don't, but my teacher could ordain. What's the situation? And he's like, can you ordain online? And I was like, nope, I can guarantee you my teacher will not do that.
Is this prior to your transmission or afterwards?
Yes, prior to my transmission.
Mhm.
And I said, you'd have to come here and you'd have to train. That's the only way.
Mhm.
And he answered, okay, I'm coming. Okay. I've actually had a few of those.
Mhm.
It's fine. And then a month or so later, we knock on the temple door. I'm here. Okay, and you are?
Invited me.
And so we trained him a little bit, and then he came a couple more times, and we trained him a little more. And he said, you know, of course, by then we knew he's from Mongolia, and he's like, can you come to Mongolia? And we're like, sure. We set up, we'll come. So my teacher and I went, and we gave him Zaike Tote at that time. I think he actually did. We did the ceremony here, and then we went, and we did Nyumon Tokudo for some of his had a gathering more already, and we gathered a few more. And actually, we have a pretty strong sangha then. I think we went 3 times: 2013, 14, 16, maybe. I think so. You know, I'm not good with dates and stuff. In that basic time frame, 2 or 3 times we went, and we would do this week-long at least seshi, and we had rooms there, and people would stay. I think the last time we even did yoga. The last 2 times we did yoga, but it wasn't a real strong session or anything, but all day doing something, you know, sitting, chanting, cooking, cleaning, like my teacher's lifestyle. He even said after, he says, we called it a session. He's like, you know, that's not really a session. I did that every day. I'm like, I know. Session's much harder. Like, okay. He says, this is more like retreat. I'm like, okay. It's probably true. Because he trained in Japan. I don't know those details. I only know from Matsuoka and Shihan, but and even then I don't know details. We didn't talk much. We trained. That's it. We sat, chanted.
I mean, it sounds like he probably spent a little bit of time in an official monastery doing Anga or something.
I don't know. I know he liked to travel and visit temples.
And so today, what is the institutional relationship between your sangha and the sister sangha? Is it just informal?
So he now has transmission, and received it shortly after I did. And so he runs it. He can ordain. He can do whatever he wants there, just like I can do here. We've talked about me coming, but COVID, of course, kind of in that. My teacher and our pictures are still up on the wall. You know, so yeah, we're a sister sangha. He runs his own. He has the lineage directly from my teacher, just like I do. My teacher's actually only given transmission to 4 of us. Zenju, who was here and moved back to Japan and now has moved to Canada. Jyozen also moved back to Japan.
When you say back to Japan, they were Japanese that
They were
lived
Japanese,
here?
right? Yeah. The early priests were all Japanese. So they have transmission in Zenju have been pretty quick, somewhere in the late 80s, probably. Jyozen, I think, was in the mid 90s. And then nobody. Even when we were supposed to do ceremonies, he's like, you know how to do this ceremony, right? I'm like, I've never seen it. Right? Shukkei Tokudo. He's like, you know how to do Shukkei Tokudo? And I'm like, we've never given anybody Shukkei Tokudo since I started. We had people living in the temple, and they had Nimon, the regular entry. I think Raquel had Zaike Tote. I have to look at the temple records. I have all the records. I'm pretty sure she has Zaike Tote, but she lived in the temple. So I assumed she had transmission or Shukkei Tokudo. She didn't. She just lived there. She helped run everything. She was really good. Gyakuden. I remember Gyakuden.
So, you know, I've seen your pictures of you participating in ceremonies at Zensuji, and for those who don't know about kind of Soto scripture, so that's the Japanese Soto mission in LA.
Right.
How did that relationship start up?
So that was fairly interesting, yes. So after I became Jushoku here, I really had very little experience outside of Kanzeonji and my root teacher. That was really all I knew. And I suddenly realized maybe I should know more. Right? It seems pretty simple what everybody else do. But I didn't think Sotoshu would accept me. Again, I thought I was the only outlying thing, right? And so I went to all the other little mostly American-run Zen centers, sitting groups.
Like Zen Center of Los Angeles, Maizumi.
Even less known.
Yeah.
Somebody who didn't seem anything but somebody who decided to have a sitting group, and most of them probably didn't even have transmission. I don't know, maybe some of them did. I didn't understand any of that. I know we did, but I didn't know what everybody else did. I didn't know our names, the way we named everything, the way we held everything was so different. Like when I said I had Zaiketo-te, to me, that's a priest. That's full blown on priest. But to some people, that's just like Jukai. It's just like, to me, that was more like Nyumon. It turns out Nyumon's lower. The way they treat, most people treat Zaike and Jukai are a little, so our Nyumon is a little lower than than that, but our Zaike is a little higher than the others. It was a little odd. And we don't have Denpo, we just have Dendoshi, which we consider, again, a little more, we consider it, you're a full blown on priest with the temple, and you can ordain, and you can do everything. Although my teacher originally, when I first took transmission, he asked that he approve anybody that I ordained. In fact, I would involve him in all the ceremonies. He would come and actually perform the first ceremonies after I took transmission. He would come perform the ceremonies.
And so anyway, so you went to Zen Tsuji.
So actually, that's the way all that worked. And then my root teacher was having a gathering for mostly the Kyudo people, but he knew the chief priest at Zen Tsuji, and there were these guys visiting from Cuba. Thank you very much. And they came to the gathering with my root teacher. And one of the people introduced me as Jyozen Anjyu. And the chief priest was there, and he said, "Oh, Anjyu, so what is the name of your aunt?" And I said, Jizo An. And this was in the middle of summer, and Jizo An is usually around August, July or August, in the temple. And he said, in his case, it's August. And he said, "Oh, in August, we're having Jizo Bon, you should come." And I said, "That would be fabulous, because I've never seen an official Jizo Bon ceremony. I'll come and I'll be able to watch it." And he said, "You have robes, right?" I'm like, "Yes, I have robes." He says, "Bring those." Like, okay. So I came, and it turns out there was usually 3 or 4 priests there, but in this case, 2 of them had gone back to Japan. So he was running the ceremony with another junior priest who actually knows everything. He's very good. And he's just never had transmission yet. And me, the 3 of us. And again, I'd never even seen it before. It turns out not to be too hard, but we were a little different, and we didn't do that. So we chanted Hanya Shingyo inside, with Dahi Shindan outside, and then Dahi Shindan inside. It wasn't too much different. But he says, "Can you do Doanino?" Now at Kanzeonji, we had a chief priest and an assistant priest, and that's it. And people who come. And so I didn't even know the term. So we called this assistant priest just Ino. That was it. So we didn't even use Doshi. We just had the abbot and Ino. And Ino basically did everything, whatever you could do. And so we divided it up. Even we can't play bells. What I know today is you play the bells, and then somebody's being Jisha, and they're bringing things around. And we would just bring things around, and we wouldn't play the bells because nobody's there. Then we'd play a few different bells because there's only 2 people. So we divided it up as best we can. But those are the only real word I do is Ino. And so he's like, "Can you do Doan Ino?" And I'm like, "Probably." "What does Doan Ino do?"
Yes. What is it?
And he explained it, and I said, "I'll do that." But we didn't have a densho, so we didn't have to ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
If we did it at all, we would just do it on a little bell. Right? We didn't have a densho. So, and again, we couldn't play those bells because I was Jisha at that time. So I couldn't do densho and Jisha at the same time. Right? So he's like, "So you know how to play the densho?" I'm like, "Probably." How do you do that, right? It turns out the other priest ended up doing that for me. But, so there's things I didn't know how to do. And that was really interesting. It turns out also our bells were a little different. I don't know if I mentioned you this. So he called it the old way. Right? He said, "Oh, you do it the old way." So yeah, I did mention it. So he kind of I think he just did whatever you're supposed to do, regardless of my bells, or maybe they matched up. That's why he was being doshi. So that was my first experience at Zenji.
Mhm.
Automatically thrown right into being Doan Ino. And then I knew there were mistakes, obviously. I didn't know exactly what I was doing for theirs. I can play Kanzeonji's way all day long with my eyes closed, right? But
Mhm.
it's a little different. There's the things they do different. There's echoes and things they do that we never did. He handled all of that. It was great. And then I was like, that's the last time they're inviting me here.
Mhm.
And he's like, can you come next month? I'm like, sure, we'll come. So I came first year, they had basically a monthly ceremony. And so I came that first year just about every month, I think. And then I tapered off. I missed a few, and then
Mhm.
came sometimes. And then every once in a while he would invite me back again, usually when they're short priests.
Mhm.
And then I asked one time, I said, when do you want me to come? And he's like, oh, you can come anytime. COVID stopped it. At one time at the beginning of COVID, I came to New Year's Day, I think it was that year. And then he said, we're gonna try to minimize, instead of trying to get more priests on the platform, we're gonna minimize it and just have a few of us on the platform.
Mhm.
So we're not throwing everything on each other all day long. And then after things calmed down a little bit, as long as we wear a mask, it was fine. Come on over.
Do you do doshi? Are you ever the doshi there?
No, I don't think that would happen. I'm not even a real Sotoshu priest, right? So that would have to be, I copy their ceremony sometimes here,
Mhm.
or my variation thereof.
When we first
I've
chatted,
done the others. I've done just about every other position, Doan, and we have a few other positions in Jisha, of course. Either there or Long Beach or Sozenji. There's 3 Sotoshu temples here at once. Okay. Japanese priests in them. So I've done some position as best I could. Those 3 and others. Well, the others I was just a visitor. I never actually was up on the platform performing at the others. There's only 3 up on the platform.
Mhm.
Oh, that's not true. I did a Jodoshu then. That was interesting.
When we first chatted, you mentioned that they offered to kind of normalize you and bring you into Sotoshu, but you didn't want to
So
do that.
there was a point, even when I first went, he said, now, Matsuoka Roshi, kind of, things happened, and so you're not,
Mhm.
would you like to be official? We could grandfather you in
Mhm.
somehow with something. And I don't know exactly what that entailed.
Mhm.
And I said, my teacher gave me transmission. And I really liked this, that it was a personal relationship that
Mhm.
came down rather than just a big
Institutional.
organization kind of thing. Not that that wouldn't be nice.
Mhm.
It's a nice thing to be part of the big organization. I certainly really like being included rather than excluded.
Mhm.
If they would say, oh, then I would be disappointed, right? But they didn't do that at all. Never, ever. Always very welcoming. Everyone I've ever met in Sotoshu is like, thank you for coming.
Mhm.
Priest of us,
Mhm.
At one time, I wore a really fancy kesa, and they never said anything until I didn't wear. He said, wear whatever you wear in your temple. So I wore that fancy kesa. That's what I wear in my temple. And I wore it. And then one day, I thought I didn't have it. I had to put a black one, I think, even, on top.
Mhm.
And I said, I don't think I have my regular kesa, but I have this black one. Is that okay? And he's like, actually, that one you were wearing was pretty fancy.
Yeah, Sotoshu has extremely strict rules about
So
right.
he says that's really for like really, really high people or really, really old people. If you're not high, if you were really old, maybe you could wear that. Right? And so I said, I didn't know. And he thought I was so cute, I think, because then I would come back with different cases. Well, how about this one? I have one now. They like very nice. It's a very nice brown case, and it's very fancy actually. The material is very nice.
Mhm.
So material was inherited from my teacher. After I got Roshi, King Roshi, he gave me this nice brown case. Even with the Sotoshu shop. There's Sotoshu shops in Japan. It's fantastic.
Mhm.
I ordered one just for me that I thought was the right color and everything. And
Mhm.
he didn't say anything, but but he did kind of. I said,
Yeah.
how about this one? And he said, yeah, you could wear that. And he says, but you don't have any questions, right? If you wear that, you don't have any questions. Something like that.
Trying to hit.
I think they just don't like answering questions. Just do the practice, do it right. And then, because it's even a little hard to get, you did that wrong. Afterwards, I would ask. I almost stopped asking, almost. So what was my worst mistake today, right? And they would like, oh, you just need more practice. You're doing fine. That's not going to help. Make the same mistake next month. But they're getting better and better at giving us, not a rehearsal, but a little clues before sometimes. We should go out half hour before, whatever. This is what we're going to do. Right? Because they put it on a piece of paper, but it's usually in Japanese. And so every once in a while they would come by and say, oh, Jyozen, this is what, I can read a little bit Japanese, but not that stuff. I mean, yeah, we're going to do 3 bows here. That's the Hanya Shingyo. The rest of it, I have no idea. Right? So they would come by and say, we're going to do this, and then this, and this, and this. And sometimes it would happen like that. Yeah.
So are you still doing martial arts these days?
COVID slowed me down. Just Tai Chi, yoga, things like that. But,
Did you
tried the online classes, both giving and taking, and I didn't.
Yeah. So did you make black belt in judo?
So not judo, but kyudo. I have. We don't call black belt. I have 5th dan in kyudo, and I have some honorary degrees above that in some other organizations, but they're honorary.
Did you ever do aikido?
Aikido, I did Aikido. I don't have a dan rank in Aikido, but I lived in the dojo for several years.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
My teacher complained that I didn't want to test enough. And the latest teacher, I did a seminar, I guess it was just before COVID. Just before COVID, I did a seminar with the teacher who runs that dojo now. And she said, the first dan is not that hard for you. You should take it. She said, what do you have now? And I said, I don't have dan. I never took the test. I didn't want to take the tests. I had dan in the Kenpo. And a test kind of, it's like a little capsule, right? This day at this time you did X, and so, I mean, they have to have something. Right? Even with this stuff, I don't really like it. It's one of the reasons I wear samurai and the casual rakusa, and they wanted me to wear, moderate kesa. It's like, fine. I just like to practice. The same with the martial arts, or whether it's meditation. I love meditation. Zazen is like just sitting here. That's all I got to do. Not always easy, I know. But.
So you mentioned a couple times that you have some Insuis, and if people listening don't know what that word means, that's kind of a postulant trainee monk.
Insui, right? I think novice priest, novice monk is the most.
So is that primarily your teaching? Are you mostly looking for people who want to ordain? Do you have lay students as well? Like what kind of teaching activities?
I tried to invent new layers. My teacher raised his eyebrows at me for that. Actually, even stronger than raising his eyebrows. So I think I'm going back to his system of Nyumon, either Zaike or Suke, and Dendoshi. And that's really all we had. And like I said, there's only 4 Dendoshi. So you could be an Unsui forever.
Do you have people that are they just want to meditate and work with the teacher, but they don't really have like clerical ambitions? Or
yeah, we have all of that. Sure.
Yeah,
I don't have that many people, dozens. So, but when we even do our Zooms, it could be 2 of us, 3 of us. Big day is 7 or 8 people showing up. It's like, wow, this must be an important day.
Yeah,
not that big. I don't mind.
So is there anything that you'd want to cover that we haven't touched on yet, or what do you think?
I don't know. I was just going to answer questions, so that's what we do.
I think
I answer it to my best of my ability. If you don't have a question, then I'm done. My teacher used to do it. We would do it right after every session. At the end, we would share tea, and he would say, "Are there any questions?" And if nobody said any, he said, "Thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
See you next time." And that was it. And my root teacher was exactly the same.
Yeah. Your teacher's still alive, is that right?
Yeah, he's only a couple years older than me.
Yeah. And what does he do these days? Do you know?
I'm sorry?
What does he do these days? You mentioned a farm?
Yeah, I think he lost the farm.
Mhm.
Somebody else owned it. He was working it, and there was a relationship thing, and so he's not on that farm anymore.
Mhm.
He was running it, and so I think he'd like to do it again, but he doesn't
Mhm.
have a place yet. So different students are helping him, taking care of him.
Okay.
He's figuring out what he's going to do next. He's hoping I'll buy a farm. We'll see.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
There's no good way. I used to do Facebook a lot. So, I mean, if you look up Jyozen Anjyu on Facebook, I still check it almost every day. Yes.
Mhm.
I used to check it several times a day. I got kind of social media out, I guess, over COVID.
Right.
I was on everything all the time, right? It's like, oh my. So I keep hoping somebody will show up here, but people are still scared. I understand. So every once in
Do
a
you
while,
guys have a website for your Sangha?
no,
Okay, so Facebook would be the best way to
that's
see
the
it.
closest I have to that kind of communication other than regular emails. Like email me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to
Okay.
speak with you.
Okay. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.